Hi Year 5, I want to start Wednesday's lesson with a couple of shout outs to two gentlemen. So, Jaden from 5P, I want to mention you today because I really like how you have edited your draft paragraph so far, adding in some adverbials and some description. And actually, I like the description that you had originally as well. So, that is a really strong, effective paragraph that you have got so far. I also want to mention the second gentleman, Matty from 5E. As you can see on Matty's, you can see the edits that he's made as he's gone on. And that's a really good example of the writing process. We put our first ideas down and then we have an opportunity to rethink it, add in some extra features, and that's a really good example of the writing process, as I said. So well done to Matty and well done to Jaden, and I'll make sure I'll add some dojo points to both of you. So really good to see. Thank you. Okay, Year 5, so today is our third editing lesson, focusing on our third draft. So we are looking at that time where Tim returned from the International Space Station and came back down to Earth. So if you can have that draft ready and something to write with, then we will begin. Here is our starter challenge for today. On the left is an image of the capsule that Tim returned to Earth in once the main parachute has released. So you can see that is floating down quite carefully, quite slowly, and then you can see at the bottom of the picture the layer of clouds. So my challenge to you is, can you create a sentence using that image that we might be able to use in our diary today? Pause the video, see what you can come up with. Okay, so this is my third paragraph draft, and today I'm going to apply the chilies that we looked at in the last two lessons one last time to improve this paragraph before, as I said before, we then move on to looking at the vocabulary and the sentence structure. So the chilies are as they were before. Chili 1 is to write in first person and past tense. Chili 2, develop cohesion. So that's linking our sentences together. Let's make sure our paragraph flows. And we're going to use adverbials to do that. And then we'll be applying language of show, not tell. So here was my paragraph previously. I remember it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines, making sure we did not do it too much or too little. Then we started the rocket, and this was worrying because it had been off for 6 months and it was like a car in winter. I was given the job of calculating our re-entry, which was surprising due to my D grade maths GCSE. After that, as we began re-entry, it felt like we were tumbling out of control, and this part lasted around 8 minutes. Then we released the parachutes and were flung around before things settled, and it took 15 minutes to reach the surface. So with that in mind, I want to have a look at this sentence in my draft in particular. And as we have previously, pause the video at this point. Where are the clues in my sentence that this is in the first person? And where are the clues that it's in the past tense? Hopefully you had a go at that. And if once you've unpaused, first person, it doesn't say I at the start of the sentence or in the middle of it, so we're looking for other clues. After that, as we. So it's just saying that Tim is part of a group because it's the three of them. So we is a clue. Does it carry on? Began re-entry. It felt like we, there it is again, were tumbling out of control. There is an example of the fact that it's first person because Tim is referring to himself within a group. Now, can we look for past tense? After that, as we began re-entry, it felt like we were tumbling out of control, and this part lasted. That's the best clue for me. This part lasted, so it's already happened, around 8 minutes. Okay, good. That's the sort of language that I'm still expecting in your improved paragraph today. Chili 2. Still looking at those adverbials, so I've still got that word mat in front of me, like we used before. Hopefully you've become a little bit more familiar with it, having used it twice already. And I'm just going to have a go at editing two of my sentences with it. The first one and the last one. So the first one was, I remember it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines, making sure we did not do it too much or too little. Now, I'm thinking, and because it's the start of the paragraph, I'm probably going to want an adverbial of time, so it tells the reader when this diary entry is happening. So looking at what's going to make sense. Afterwards, no. Next year, I remember, that doesn't make any sense. In the morning might be more useful to us. So if I just switch, hopefully, so I'm putting some text in. See if this works. In the morning, I remember it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines. In the morning, I remember. It wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn. Maybe it might be on my final morning, to give it a bit clearer that it's the end of everything. On my final morning, I remember it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth. That makes a little bit more sense. Now, if I move to my final sentence, then we released the parachutes and were flung around before things settled, and it took 15 minutes to reach the surface. Now, I'm going to use an adverbial of place this time, thinking back to that starter challenge. So I'm going to go with high above a blanket of clouds, comma, high above a blanket of clouds, we released the parachutes and were flung around before things settled, and it took 15 minutes to reach the surface. The bit on the end, it took 15 minutes. I'm not sure about that. I might, when we look at the sentence structure, use parenthesis at this point and put that extra information about the timing into brackets, but I will come on to that another time. So I have put in an adverbial of time on my final morning, and then I've put an adverbial of place, saying where this action is happening. High above a blanket of clouds, we released the parachutes. For Chile 3, I want to focus on how Tim was feeling at the start of his journey home. Now, whilst he's well trained, he could still have been feeling nervous because it was a lot of things that could go wrong and a lot of things you have to be so careful with. So I'm going to focus on sort of nerves and anxiety. But I don't want to say, on my final morning, I was nervous. I want to put it in a more creative way. So I'm thinking something like, on my final morning, I remember I felt like I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach. Because that's basically that phrase of you've got a butterfly in your stomach, but I'm going to go more extreme. I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach. So on my final morning, I remember I felt like I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach. And it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines, making sure we did not do it too much or too little. Maybe I would because work instead. I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach because it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth. Yeah, let's go with because. I think that makes more sense. On my final morning, I remember I felt like I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach because it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines, making sure we did not do it too much or too little. Now, something that you could do is maybe draw a picture of what people look like when they're nervous. What do they do with their hands? What's their facial expression? How do they speak? And use that as an idea that you could put into your paragraph. Now, so here is my complete paragraph. On my final morning, I remember I felt like I had 1,000 butterflies in my stomach because it wasn't until the second orbit of the Earth that we began to burn the engines, making sure we did not do it too much or too little. Carefully, we started the rocket and held our breath. Instead of saying worrying, I wanted to use a bit more show, not tell there. As it had been off for 6 months and it was like a car in winter, I was given the job of calculating our re-entry, which was surprising due to my D-grade maths GCSE. After that, as we began re-entry, it felt like we were tumbling out of control, and this part lasted around 8 minutes. High above a blanket of clouds, we released the parachutes and were flung around before things settled, and it took 15 minutes to reach the surface. Okay, year 5, you know the chilies, you know what to do. Make sure you send it into the year 5 address. Good luck.